Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me, Greg, as always, here to talk about the last week of college basketball and then preview this week of college basketball. Greg, how are you doing as we end January this week?
Oh man, I just the last 2 weeks it feels like I'm looking at our list of stuff to talk about, and it just keeps getting longer and longer. It's like when we bought our house and we said there was a list of things that we wanted to fix, and it's only gotten longer instead of shorter. So, hey, this is good, man. There's more basketball to watch than I know what to do with.
Yep, and only one more football game for the season with the end of Super Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks. So a lot of people are flooding their way towards college basketball. And honestly, with the way the sport's set up, this is a perfect time to be doing it. There's a lot more, with the conference realignment, there's a lot more big games every single week. Like you said, Greg, there's a lot more to talk about. In that spirit, though, we are changing how we're doing things here. We're going to go over the top stories in the sport to start, and they'll probably do more quick hitters throughout the rest of the time. I feel like this would probably be a good way for us to not harp on the same thing, not say the same things over and over, and maybe not maybe overanalyze every game like every team's NCAA tournament chances hinge on every single game. That's something that Greg and I both felt that we were doing, and it'll help kind of, I think, highlight for some of these fans who are coming in, maybe not the most into it at the start of the season, to highlight what's going on in college basketball in a way and keep us focused on some of the news, not just all the games. So let's get it started, Greg. Let's start with Todd Golden had his Title IX suit dismissed by Florida, and there was a statement by him and his lawyers basically saying, yeah, we said this was all made up, and it basically was. We're not going to speculate on what may have happened there, but he is free and clear to coach the rest of the year, it looks like. And at least the Title IX is clear. I assume there's not going to be any more legal action if that cleared, because that seems like it, something that would be the first step to going into a different direction. But for a program that had a little bit of a cloud hanging over their head, just kind of waiting, now that cloud has been removed.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I just went and looked around at some of the comments, here and there. Just did a little Twitter search on his name, and it was funny, like, literally 24 to 48 hours ago, I see Florida fans saying things like, I can't wait till the rug is pulled out from underneath us, and something happens to Todd Golden. The season's going too well, and we're not allowed to have nice things and whatever. So, like, do you remember when I brought this up and I just said, we have to mention it. We have to keep it. It could come out. A decision could come out of nowhere, and it's precisely what happened. Just, hey, here's a news dump. As to like the you're right. We can't speculate on what actually happened. I mean, like, when you read some of those things that were in that student report, it doesn't sound great, but the Title IX office, the Title IX suit says it's done. So the only thing we're going to look at is, hey, from basketball terms, the only thing that Florida has to deal with going forward is the Torian Green stuff, which is also a Title IX suit. But your head coach versus an assistant coach, different cloud over your program. And this is one that it sounded like the investigation had lasted some time before it was made public in November. And, Golden made a comment about how he had been cooperating. I can't remember what the time frame. So it sounds like this has been active for a while, and now it's shut. So Florida's back to being, hey, it's top 10 team. Ceiling is the roof, as Michael Jordan would say.
That is true. You mentioned Torian Green, former Florida Gator great, is accused of sexual assault. So seemingly a little bit more intensive things he's being accused of than Todd Golden. As they asked Todd Golden about it, he said he's kind of frustrated with the system of Title IX, and that's basically because he's gone through it. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of this, and I think from the story I read, it was like this might be a little bit connected to the Golden stuff too. So I don't want to speculate on anything, and maybe there is people just accusing these guys of doing that. Maybe they're not. Maybe they, hopefully Title IX gets to the bottom of it. Hopefully the university gets to the bottom of it, or law enforcement does. But you're right. The overarching theme is now you have an assistant coach who's in that boat. A little bit lesser of a cloud over your program. Your head coach will be there, and he's been doing a fantastic job. I mean, to be honest, that's just well and above, Greg, I was pretty high on Florida to start the year. This is well and above what I ever thought they would do. I would like their guards, and they're doing really well. So we will keep tabs on Florida. We will be picking one of their games later, and it's going to be possibly a big week for them. All right, Greg, the biggest story of the week, I think, might be Houston. Last week, they dominated Utah in a game where I believe, I don't have it in front of me right now, Greg, but I believe they held Utah to 36 points, I think was the total score. And that defense, they kind of did a thing on College Game Day talking about the monster defense where they trapped the ball after the ball screen, and that really confuses teams. It was really good. So if you want to learn some X's and O's, watch that. And then they go into Allen Fieldhouse. Now this is a team at this point, Greg, who did not have a quad one win on the season. We talked about that last week, which is pretty incredible because we're at the end of January now, and this is a team that's in the Big 12. And they look like they're not going to get one here, right? So we're just going to fast forward to the end of the game where they have a 6-point deficit. DeJuan Harris misses 2 free throws, and then Houston takes an incredibly deep and tough 3. They make that one. They get a steal on the inbounds pass. They make that 3. They go to overtime. They're able to kind of withstand that. Then they go into double overtime and are able to get the win. And it was one of the more incredible games I think we've seen this year, Greg. And I think it's something that is huge for Houston to get that quad one win. It's important to note for Kansas they did not have KJ Adams. They were not at full strength. But it was crazy, wild, however you want to say it, and one of the best basketball games we had this whole season.
Yeah. DeJuan Harris is at the line with, I think it's 18.9 seconds in overtime, 79-73 lead. If you'd have bet my house on who was going to win that game, it would be Kansas. Like, zero questions whatsoever. But weird things happen. Harris is like a 70+% free throw shooter, misses both of a double bonus. That's not going to happen all that often. Emmanuel Sharp, who had been hobbled from literally the first possession of the game, he had come in with an injury in the first possession of the game. He leaves. He stayed longer in the locker room at halftime. He hits this falling away 3-pointer. Unreal. Okay, Bill Self calls a timeout. There's only 7.5 seconds left. You're up 3. You just got to inbound the ball. This is off of a timeout. Mm-hmm. Off of a timeout. Throws the ball to Hunter Dickinson. I, for the life of me, can't remember who tapped it away, but Malik Wilson, who had been on fire for this whole game, he had a great game. I don't know if you noticed, Joe. He came out. He started the second half. Mm-hmm. He had a fantastic game. Hits another improbable 3, and we go to double overtime, and Houston seals the deal in double overtime. There's no question. The one thing you did say, and I heard this somewhere else today, Houston didn't have a quad one win until this game. That was true. Yep. UCF has become a quad one win, so they technically have 2. That's the weird, finicky thing about this. It's still, numbers aside, whether it's 1 or 2, they don't have a huge amount of these staple dynamite diamond wins that you want to have when we're looking ahead. I still think it's one of those things where they're a great team, or maybe you might say maybe they're good, not great, but we could look up and all of a sudden they're in the Elite 8, and it's, who saw this coming? Well, I mean, they can't help that some of the teams on their schedule haven't been, like the Big 12 isn't exactly all it's cracked up to be. Although I think over the last couple of weeks we're seeing maybe it's better than we thought it was going to be. Still, definitely not top 2 league in the country like it usually is, but might end up being a little bit better. So it's just, I don't know if you have their schedule pulled up. I have the box score pulled up right now. I'm curious what kind of opportunity. I know we're going to pick one of their games this weekend, but it's still not. It's a good game, but it's still not a premier win that you might want to get. So we'll just have to see. Do you have it pulled up and see what they
Yeah,
have left besides Texas Tech?
they have 4 ranked games left. 2 of them against Texas Tech, 1 against Iowa State, and 1 more against Kansas. So they get a pretty tough draw for the Big 12, to be honest. I mean, that's all the ranked teams right there. We just mentioned them.
So okay, so they are going to have opportunities. It stinks that they couldn't get a win against Auburn out on neutral, but only one other team has beaten Auburn, and that was at home. Couldn't beat Bama, but they held them close. That was in November. I think that was at the Vegas tournament or whatever. Excuse me. But they're gonna have the opportunities. They've got on their schedule the opportunities. Where do you think they ultimately end up? Do you think I don't know where they're at in your bracketology right now. I think they're good. I picked them to win the Big 12. I don't think they're going to win the Big 12. I think Iowa State's going to win the Big 12, but I still think they're probably a 3 seed or a 4 seed in maybe not in resume. They may not have the resume to be a 3 or 4 seed, but I think they're good enough to be a 3 or 4 seed.
Yeah, it's crazy. There are teams that are.
Where do you have them? Where do you have them right now?
I don't have a bracketology I've done recently enough to kind of adjust because they did get 2 quad 1 wins. So I won't say that, but I will say there are teams that are down in the 40s and 50s that have the same number or more quad 1 wins, which is crazy to think. But yeah, I think they would probably be around a 3 or 4 seed, which shows you the craziness of the net because they've been like 3 all season long in the net. And to be honest, like, the net's kind of crazy too. We saw Xavier beat UConn this weekend. We'll talk some Big East basketball later, but Xavier dropped 2 points in 2 spots in the net after winning that game. So there's plenty of like crazy stories like that, and like you said, UCF jumping in. This is to me, Greg. Like I think you talked about ceiling, a team that like I don't know if they can make like the Elite 8, Final 4, but I'll tell you what. Out of all the teams who are in, not Auburn, Duke, I think it's a team that most teams might not want to play. Like, I think if you include Iowa State in that, Alabama and Florida, like, Alabama has a bad shooting night, something like that, that's fine. I think we're still trying to figure out Michigan State. Like, any of the top 10 teams, I think outside of Auburn and Duke, I do not want to play Houston if it's my team more than anyone else. Like, I think that's a trap waiting to happen. I don't know how you feel, if you feel similarly, but that's how I would say.
That's exactly what I mean. That's just a different way of saying, like, I think we're on the same page in different words. I think they're a 3 or a 4 seed. Might not have the resume of a 3 or 4 seed, but they think they're as dangerous as a 3 or 4 seed. Joe, if you don't have anything else to add on Houston, I do want to touch on Kansas.
Yeah, go ahead.
You already mentioned no KJ Adams for them. The bright side, you get a lot of production out of Rylan Griffin. Did you notice a little bit of it? And I don't know if when they played, who did they play early? They played TCU early in the week. They played someone early in the week, so I don't know if Self did this with the starting lineup where he started Dickinson and Flory Badunga earlier, or if this is a brand new invention. But the point is, he's been playing around with the pieces. Shaq Moore's moved into the starting lineup. Now we've got Flory Badunga in the starting lineup, and maybe he'll keep it like that. Maybe when KJ Adams comes back, it'll. But it seems like, yes, it's weird because it's against a Houston team that on paper you're like, well, they're not that good. Yeah, okay, they have a number 7 next to their name, or I think they moved up to 6th in the rankings today. But I think they're actually like, yes, they lost this game at home. I like that we see a little bit of production from some of those guys, other not named Zeke Mayo. The AJ Storr thing continues to be confounding. Looks lost out there. Well, just can't find a rhythm. I don't have an explanation for a guy that averaged almost 18 points a game for Wisconsin last year cannot find anything for Kansas. I don't have an explanation for it. Do you? Because I don't.
I think Wisconsin has done a really good job of making wings look really good. We talked about Johnny Davis a couple of years ago, and now I believe he's not really doing much in the NBA. So that's something to watch out for. But also, Greg, it was kind of like they've had issues with this before. Like Andrew Wiggins panned out. He scored 17 points a game for Kansas. But like Xavier Henry, I don't know if people remember him. Maybe didn't have the best time. Like they have this weird thing where a lot of the wings don't necessarily work out in a way that really is productive. And I think it's partially how they run things. Like you mentioned, Badunga started. He did start against TCU too. just to note that. But they have two bigs on the floor. It makes it less. Obviously, more teams have more wings. They have a lot of guards. Sometimes they'll play 2-point guards at the same time. They've done that before, and obviously Zeke Mayos has experience at the point as well. But this is like, it's definitely like I like that they're changing things up and they're trying different things, especially with Adams out. But I don't know at what point. Like we're at the end of January, and like they're 14-5. But, like, it is getting a little bit scary to me that some of these guys haven't, like, AJ Storr haven't figured it out. Like, Rylan Griffin is still very streaky, you would say. And you don't know who you're going to go with. So, and honestly, part of the game, too, like, the inbounds pass. Like, this is stuff you have to practice and practice and practice. And you think with such a veteran team of guys who have plenty of experience, with some new pieces thrown in there. But, like, you have DeJuan Harris, who's played, it seems like he's been in college forever. Hunter Dickinson, who has been in college forever. Like, you got to figure this thing out. So, I think Kansas might be in a similar boat to where they were last year, where they finished with the 4 seed. Obviously, that's kind of playing out this year, but like you don't know what their ceiling is. It might be losing in the second round again, which is not going to make Kansas fans happy. But I think it's just a lot of like parts that just don't go together. And honestly, it's tough to say because I think the talent level, you look at this team and like we did preseason, Greg, like they are, if you were kind of ranking the teams, top 2 or 3 team in the country talent level wise. It's just maybe not the best shooting sometimes, maybe AJ Storr not being as good as we thought, or maybe being too inconsistent for Rylan Griffin, or Dickinson's defensive troubles kind of stepping up too. So, and that was something that came up in this game too. We saw Juwan Roberts have 24 points. He's not a guy who's like, they're not like running the offense through him as much. Like it's still about LJ Cryer for the most part, although he went 2 for 12, and they gave up 24 points to Juwan Roberts, and I think that's going to be tough. So I'm with you. I'm a little bit concerned about Kansas. I do like that they're jumbling things up, and if you're going to trust a coach to figure it out, I would trust Bill Self to be able to do that. All right, Greg, let's move on. We have some more to talk about. Ohio State is a team that had been getting close and really ripping the hearts out of their fans for a lot of these games. And a team that not really in the tournament picture because of some of these results, Greg. But they do a good job. On Tuesday, they beat Purdue on the road, which really gives them a very nice win to put under the resume. This is big for Ohio State because we talked about the Big Ten and how the conference isn't maybe the best in different ways. They're 3-5 in conference after they win this game. And they seem like they're starting to figure things out. Last year we saw that they kind of played well down the stretch. Maybe they can get this thing going. We talked enough about Purdue from my perspective. Greg, if you have something to add about them, that's fine too. But they still have a lot to figure out with maybe who that fourth guy could be between Smith, Lawyer, and Kaufman-Renn. But for me, this is just a really big game for Ohio State. A kind of almost like a need to have this game, and they got it. And that is a huge upset, which puts them back in play to maybe make a run to the tournament.
Yeah, there's not much to add about Purdue, kind of like you said. I mean, Painter's mixing with the pieces a little bit, not in the same way Bill Self, but Jakari Harris was a starter earlier in the year, and CJ Cox had that nice game and then kind of fell to the wayside. And now he's back in the starting lineup, so Painter's messing around with that stuff. I think when I hear you say, hey, they're looking for that fourth guy, they've got some things pretty much figured out. Mm-hmm. But maybe need to when you start talking about solidifying that fourth and fifth option, we're talking about a good team moving to a great team. Okay, they're solid. I think the thing that weirds me out is I think it was 26 straight they'd won at Mackey, and they were up 13 points at halftime. Now, there's only so much that can be done when Micah Parrish just absolutely heats up like a microwave. I mean, the only thing you could say is this guy's hit like 3 in a row and you're giving him space on the perimeter. What are you doing? There were a couple of those times where he got the ball, I think twice on 2 possessions in a row. He got the ball in the corner and it was like, yeah, their hand was up, but he had space to shoot. And when the guy has like 5 threes at that point, like it's time to guard him. It's okay. Force him off, run him off the perimeter, make him do something different. He's feeling it. That's the only kind of thing I would say is maybe question that perimeter defense a little bit, or specifically Micah Parrish. But the Ohio State side, I think I said this to you sometime this week, or maybe I said it to someone else, but between the Michi Johnson and the who am I missing? Who else has been out? Oh, the Bradshaw, and they've just had so much extracurricular stuff going on. They've had injury after injury, but not like injuries that take guys out for, but missing games, missing practices here and there. Maybe it just took them a little bit to gel. We could talk about this later, but I do almost wonder if Xavier's in a similar situation where it sometimes if you just don't have your whole roster together, and you can't make that excuse all the time. There is some next man up, but sometimes to get over this kind of stuff, it might take a little time to figure out what everybody's role is and whatnot. I'm not saying this team is gonna go on a tear and make the tournament, but this team that played the second half of the Purdue game, they could. I wasn't just the Micah Parrish stuff. There was other stuff going on that made me say, okay, there is something to this team. I would like to see some consistency. That's obviously what they've lacked, but maybe they've lacked consistency because of the other stuff they've dealt with. Joe, I can't remember. I was going to pull it up. What did they do? What did they do this weekend? I thought were they off this weekend? That was their Tuesday game.
Mm-hmm. They were off this weekend, so they got
okay.
Yeah, they're off this weekend, so they're 11-8 overall, 3-5 in conference, and they've shown these flashes, Greg. But I think seeing this come to fruition with Michi Johnson out for this game is huge because they have so much talent. And you're right, I think it's about figuring it out, but also like as much as it stakes, you got to cut the rotation down. So they had a couple guys like Evan Mahaffey has played a decent role for them. He only played 7 minutes in this one. Just a lot of guys were I think having to figure out the roles, and that's what helped them last year too. They had to redefine roles and kind of get the rotation in order after Diebler got the job, and they figured it out. So there is enough potential on this team to make the tournament, to possibly be a dangerous tournament team, especially with their guard play. If you throw out Thornton, Mobley, and Johnson if he comes back, that's a pretty dangerous team you don't want to go up against. So we'll keep tabs on them, like you said. Still a lot to be decided with their tournament fate, whether they can kind of keep this together. Upcoming for them, they have Iowa at home, and then at Penn State, and then at Illinois. So plenty of chances to get some decent wins coming up in Big Ten play for them. All right, we have Texas A&M was the big story of the week in the SEC for multiple reasons. One, because they came back from the brink of death against Ole Miss and were able to get the win. And then conversely, same thing happened from Texas. So in a rivalry game in this conference, Texas A&M at Texas, and they blow it. So we'll start with the Ole Miss game. They're down for most of the game. They really don't shoot the ball well. Like Wade Taylor, 2 of 12 again. I mean, I know Greg and I both like him. He is so inefficient some games. It is ugly to watch. Zurich Phelps had 14 points to lead their scorers, but just tough physical basketball, and this was a bar fight of a game with Ole Miss. And got the job done to get the win. Conversely, Texas maybe gets a little bit hot, and they blow this one, which is not something you expect from a team with so many experienced guards. And not to get into too many specifics about the game from my end, Greg, just because I want to make sure we have it all covered. And then we have Rodney Terry kind of like bragging about the win afterwards, the guy who said don't do horns down. So he's not really buying a lot of goodwill with a lot of college basketball fans, because it's kind of hard to complain about people doing horns down and then kind of celebrate like he did right in the middle of the Texas A&M fans. So thoughts on that? I mean, I think this is just kind of how it goes with SEC play individually, and how if your team is like run by Wade Taylor, who at his best is awesome and at his worst is borderline unwatchable. I mean, this happens.
It's a good thing they brought in Zurich Phelps, because he has been that steady presence. It feels like he's just been solid. Yes, he's had games where he has completely gone off, but I don't remember him having any real stinkers. I mean, 6 of 19 and 0 of 5 from 3 is not your greatest, but if you look up and down the board for both teams, that's not terrible. The shooting, just there was turnover after turnover both ways in this game. It was a sloppy, and when you start thinking Texas A&M, Buzz Williams defense, and Chris Beard's on the other end, and the way he's coaching this Ole Miss team, pretty much got exactly what you thought you were going to get. But not necessarily the comeback, but low 60s game. Shooting was not the greatest, but it wasn't necessarily shot making. It was defensive pressure both ways. You're gonna have those games, and sometimes you're gonna have those games where the defense is good but your shooting is better. Sometimes you just make the tough shots. This wasn't that game. I watched every minute of it. The thing about college basketball is I enjoy that I can watch Kentucky Bama 1 minute, and then a few days later I watch this game, and those are in the same conference. They're not just in the same sport; they are in the same conference. That's part of the reason I've always loved the NCAA tournament too. But as far as both of these teams, sometimes I forget how high Texas A&M is in KenPom right now. I think when I looked this afternoon, they're like 9th or 10th in KenPom. Ole Miss is not. They're a little bit down the road. I don't know what draws their computer numbers to be different than Texas A&M's because they play very similarly. Mm-hmm. There was times though where they were moving up and down the floor. Texas A&M was running that diamond press, and Ole Miss did a great job of getting the ball to the middle of the floor, and then once they got it over half court, getting it to one of the corners, and they got a couple of great looks. Jalen Murray had a nice game. Sean Padula had a nice game. This team is good. It's just another one of those things where how good are they going to be? I would almost say if you came to me and I was Chris Beard and you said, "Hey, I'll let you go 500 the rest of the way in the SEC," I might take that. Like the SEC is that good. And I don't know what in particular what they have on their schedule, but this is just this game is just an example of how tough the SEC is, and like they go on and they lose to Mizzou this weekend. And that was another ranked on ranked. There's just no nights off like anywhere at all.
No, I mean okay.
I still think Ole Miss is absolutely a tournament team. I think they're better than like 7-8 seed territory. They're probably somewhere around there. And I think if they're playing a team from another conference, as long as they're healthy, whoever else is not going to know what hit them, because they're just going to be battle tested at this point.
Yeah, they definitely be battle tested, and they play a style that teams aren't familiar with seeing. Yeah, I had my last bracketology. I had them up at like a 5 seed, I think, and they lost 3 straight games, and they're all understandable losses when you talk about all of them are ranked teams. So they're going to slip a little bit and to be a team that will be a tough matchup for some of these other teams. But you're right. That's the toughness of the SEC to kind of point a picture on that. Texas had really been struggling. They beat Texas A&M on Saturday. They beat Missouri earlier in the week. So now Texas has went from a team that people were thinking outside looking in for the tournament to now maybe even comfortably in because those are 2 quad 1 wins. That's how much things are going to change this year with the conference realignment where like a lot of times last year you could have a team go like weeks without playing a team that's worth anything. Not going to happen this year, not in the SEC at least. So Texas is on the right track now. And to kind of go further on that with the SEC, Greg, Vanderbilt beats Kentucky. They're at home in this one. We have, I think, a Vanderbilt team that is battle tough. And I mentioned that, like, with Kentucky, it's a lot about what they do wrong in terms of, like, how they lose. And there was some element of that. But we also have to give credit to Vanderbilt because I think that their offensive system is perfect. This is a team that lists every single player as a point guard. And they're all supposed to make decisions. So, in a way, they kind of play like Kentucky, where Kentucky runs things through their big men. But they get this win, and it was, I think, a good thing by them to have this offense where, you have different guys who can create because you had A.J. Hoggard, the Michigan State guy, which is probably the guy that most people are familiar with from Vanderbilt, at least historically from the last couple of years of college basketball. He had 5 points. 2 of 8 shooting. They had other guys step up. Jason Edwards had 18 points. Watching this game as a Kentucky fan was frustrating for me. And again, there was some element of Kentucky shooting themselves in the foot, but I think a lot of credit has to go to Vanderbilt. New coach this year, Mark Byington. It is a very good team. They're now ranked after this. They're 16-4 and 4-3 in conference. They hadn't played all that many big games before these last 2 weeks, Greg, but they've for sure held their own enough to kind of get some consideration here. So a very fun team, a one to watch out in the SEC, and it's just going to make the SEC end of the season when you have teams like Vanderbilt stepping up a bloodbath.
Yeah, I looked today because it feels like in my head that it's been an eternity since Vanderbilt has been ranked. It's not. It's not actually been that long. They were ranked in 15-16. Stallings last year as the coach. Not only that, they made the tournament that year, and they made the tournament their first year with Bryce Drew the very next season. So I forget, I was just peeping at this. I forget that we're not that far removed from Vanderbilt being like a presence in basketball. Maybe not like, I'm not saying they were like dominant, but a decent. It almost kind of feels like Stanford-ish, where they were like a good basketball school for a while, and they've just kind of dropped off. But my question to you, I don't have anything to really add to the game. I heard someone say something about they're worried about Kentucky. I'm not. This game was at Vanderbilt, a team that the only thing we could say is, hey, the same thing we've been saying. Let's pick the defense up a little bit, but I don't have existential crisis about Kentucky. Mark Byington steps right in first year. Are we going to be seeing him like? This is the thing. If you're in an SEC job, granted, Vanderbilt is probably have some more strenuous academic standards than other schools in the SEC, but what he's doing now is working year one. Do you think he might do hey, I'm going to jump to whatever is open? Like I don't think he'll be on Carolina's list, but and I think that job's going to open up next year the way that's going. But do you think he looks and says, yeah, I'm gonna jump to the next job, or hey, I'm in the SEC, all the money's here, all the NIL's here. Maybe it's not a school where I have all of every opening, but it's probably where you want to be right now. I don't know. I just didn't know if you had a feel for that. If you think, because I feel like we've seen a lot more coaches do the one and done. I do a year, we do really good, I go on to the next job. But he's already in a power conference team. So I don't know. I just didn't know if you had any feel for that.
I think he would leave the job for one that is objectively better, but that's fluid, right? So like we've seen teams do well and they actually reinvest in the basketball program or reinvest in NIL, whatever they need to do. And if they do that, there is a good chance they can keep them there. And living in Nashville is nice. For obviously some maybe people who live there don't like the touristy areas, but you can stay away from it. It's a nice place to be. There are academic standards, but it is a job where you can be successful. We saw that with Kevin Stallings, and while that was 9 years ago now, that's just crazy. But that is like you can have some sustained success there. I think with the way things are going with NIL money, like if someone even, I don't know, I think SEC he might still take a job. If it's a different job, like in the ACC, it might need to be a big blue blood or a better program. But it's just, it all depends on what Vanderbilt wants to put into the program, and I'm not sure what that's going to end up looking like. So I can't really answer that, but I will say, if you're ranking jobs in the SEC, Vanderbilt's probably still the worst. Just because of the academic restrictions. Tennessee's not the greatest basketball state in terms of producing talent. And honestly, it's just like, see, even some of the old teams that always were not very good, like Ole Miss. I mean, Chris Beard has things rolling. So, and in South Carolina too. South Carolina has played pretty well recently, and last year was a little bit better. But is it a better job than South Carolina? I have no idea. So this definitely is a conundrum, and I am interested to see what he does. But I think for the short term, he has a lot to focus on, because I think that they have 6 of their next 7 games are ranked. Or no, okay, 6 of the next 8 games are ranked, I believe, in their schedule. So they might be a team that are hot right now, but maybe falls on their face, especially because I think they have not just all ranked teams, but 4 of their next 6 are Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, and Kentucky, who are the best teams in the SEC, probably, if I'm not missing anyone. So, going to be interesting to see what they do. Greg, any final thoughts on Vanderbilt? All right.
Fun to have some new blood. Look good.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the SEC play itself out because there's going to be teams who miss the tournament. There's going to be teams who are in the first day of that SEC tournament who are interesting. But, Greg, we have more SEC news. This is the biggest conference. We have Mark Sears being benched against LSU in the second half. And it was a close game. And you know, Mark Sears was not hitting his shots. But that is... Sorry, like, Alabama's fine. It seems like maybe this is something that needs to be talked about because this is not normal. Like, a National Player of the Year candidate being benched for an entire half because he wasn't hitting shots. Now, he was 0 of 5 from the floor, 0 of 2 from 3. He still had 3 assists. He had 3 rebounds. I get that he has some defensive limitations, but... And Alabama is deep. But this was absolutely crazy to me that they benched him because this is a team leader. This is a guy who has led you for the last 2 seasons. This is his 3rd season in Alabama. I think I have a take on it I'm going to go over, but this to me was crazy, and I do think they have some issues moving forward with this. Chemistry-wise, your team leader, are you hurting his confidence? Does he not like the coach anymore? This is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Even if you are going to like say, hey, we're not going to play you as much because you're not hitting your shots, maybe you play him 5 or 6 minutes the second half, but he was benched for the entire second half. Crazy.
I don't know what to make of this. I have had in my short coaching tenure one time where a kid gave me a certain attitude or talk back. I personally don't care if you're making or missing shots because I know from like the thing is Nate Oates knows, yes, some days you'll have it and some days you won't. But Nate Oates knows overall he's a great player. So to me, this has to be one of those like attitude type things. It has to have been something that built up to this. There is no way in my mind that this was just, hey, you don't have it today. I'm gonna bench you for the whole second half. Like you said, if it was you don't have it today, because we saw this early one. We actually saw. Do you remember we saw this earlier in the year? He spent a significant. I can't remember who they were playing. He spent a significant time on the bench. I believe it was in the second half. Do you remember who were they playing?
I don't remember. But do you remember what the story came out of that about was?
No, I can't remember.
He benched himself. He said he wasn't making shots, so he benched himself. Now it's the coach benching him for not making shots. But again, it was a bad half for him. But to give up on that guy was crazy. I have another take about it, but I'm going to let you finish your thought because I was just answering what you said.
I want to hear this because I have no idea
Okay.
They have a game that we're going to pick this week. I'm hoping we can get a double box of okay. Here is the game, and here is what's going on the bench. Whole game. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, this is for me. This is like I'm the guy who like anyone can be a decent defender. Put your mind to it. Anyone can rebound. Anyone can box out. Right? Like those are things that you can control. Is Nate Oates gonna say that just because a guy is missing shots, he has no value to the team? Because that's what he said. His post-game press conference, he talked about how awesome Mark Sears was and how much work ethic he has, all that stuff. But he wanted to put guys in who can help him win the game. And yeah, it was a bad game for him. But like, are you saying that making shots is that valuable that having one guy who's having an off night on the floor is going to ruin your chances to beat an LSU team who has one conference win so far? Because I think we're getting to a point with analytics where that is crazy, that there's no added value of Mark Sears being a team leader, being a guy who sets things up, everything else. And to me, I'm the guy who says, like, if you give me a guy who can score 15 points a game, that is more valuable than a guy who's, like, averages, 8, 6, and 6. Because getting a basket is tough. So I'm a guy who leans more towards the scoring. But even then, I'm like, hey, was the analytics telling him to bench him? Like, you can't do that to players, especially, like, ripping their confidence. Mark Sears' mom is going after, like, the decision on Twitter and everything. It is now a bad situation that I think stems from this, and maybe there is some like background stuff with like his leadership or something, but crazy to me that this would happen. One, and now I think that also just impacts them for the future too, because is Mark Sears' confidence going to be there? If he misses one shot, is he going to be worried about missing two? I don't think I've ever seen anything like this where a guy gets benched for what seems like non-disciplinary action and just playing poorly in a first half after he was mature enough to bench himself in the first time this happened. I don't know, Greg. I think that's my take. Is just like I cannot believe we got this far where the only story coming out is that he was missing shots from Nate Oates. And there's like definitely a video of Mark Sears on the bench kind of like seeming like he's griping, complaining, maybe crying on the bench. But like the only reason they've given us is that he's missing shots. And I am just like, my mind is blown that you have a senior point guard that has done so much for this program. And you're like, no, he's on the bench. And it's all because he was missing shots. That's it.
I do like where you're going with that, because you can look at numbers and figures and stats and efficiency all you want, and oh well, Alabama's strength is their offense, so if he doesn't have that offense, you know, he's not worth being on the floor. We heard something similar about what Hurley was doing with Aiden Mahaney earlier this year. Hey, he can't play defense, and he's not providing us enough on offense. But this is a whole other stratosphere from that. This is, like Joe said, National Player of the Year candidate, definitely conference all first team, all American, all accolades, all whatever. The only thing I'll add to what you said is sometimes when you see the Rothstein tweet or people say call someone a glue guy, kind of roll your eyes, like it's kind of corny, like okay, we're not going to say that about everyone under the sun, but I think it is important to consider. I think maybe you talk about intangibles when you're breaking down film, or not breaking down film, but when you're talking about drafting a guy in football. Joe's also an NFL draft analyst. Check out his Twitter; it should be right under his picture there. There is something to, and just I see now we got to talk. We do have to talk about something a little abstract. So I don't know that I'm going to find the words to talk about it, but there is something other than just numbers to sports, not just basketball, to sports. But I think about how I played when I played with you versus when I played with random people at the rec. I mean, there's something to those things, both from knowing your teammates and from that leadership quality that you talked about. The story is different when earlier in the year, if it's true, and now maybe we look at that under a microscope. I'm taking myself out. It's almost like that Anthony Davis, hey guys, I ain't got it tonight. Like, I'm just going to keep affecting shots. You guys keep putting it in the basket. That's it. Like, part of being a leader is that sort of thing. I think if you get too analytic-y and numbery, like you said, you can lose sight of the fact that these are not robots. You can put a kid in that is a 45% three-point shooter, and he might go 0 of 10. And you can be the Magic, and you just need a free throw to seal the game. And you miss the first one, and then you laugh at yourself. Like, there's things to sports other than figures and numbers. So you do lose a little bit of that. And I know Joe has said it. We've gone way too much into the analytics. I do still like the numbers and figures, but I think kind of had the revolution myself. Like, if you're not applying that to what you're seeing on the floor, kind of the thought I had a couple of years ago, not that I'm coming up with anything new, but like the realization I finally had, if you're not actually watching the games and seeing what's going on, and you're just looking at numbers and box scores, you're missing like half the story, because there's stuff like this. Maybe this, you say it's non-disciplinary, but maybe there was something else going on that we don't know about and they don't want to talk about in public. And this was his way of saying, hey man, not only are you not playing well, but you got XYZ going on. And all we can do is speculate.
Mhm.
But if it truly is just, hey, you're not hitting shots today, then are we going to get to a point where, oh, my starting lineup isn't hitting shots today? I'm just going to put in 5 reserves for the whole game. Like, I don't know, man.
It brings up
It's just something to monitor.
like questions about a lot of old basketball adages, like of like good shooter. Like if you're a good shooter, just keep on shooting, right? They didn't give Mark Sears a chance to keep on shooting and to find his rhythm. The other one, which is the new thing, that you can't get in a zone, and that's just a fallacy. I think that's BS, right? Like I think you can get in the zone. I think you can get in your head and play poorly. Uh, if that is true, then by the analytics, it would eventually even out, and he would hit those shots, right? And even if it isn't, I would trust my guy to get into his zone or to get out of his own funk. Uh, but it just brings up all these questions, and I think this one little act of like playing Mark Sears, I don't think would have lost them the game. Like, yes, it was close. Yes, he wasn't playing well. I think they would have figured it out. Did that one decision by Nate Oates really cost them in a lot of ways? Like, possibly, again, you can't sit out second halves and be National Player of the Year. Can this cost them as National Player of the Year and prestige for the university and possible recruiting for the university future? Sure. Can it cost them a chance to yeah, his confidence to win games, to maybe go far in the tournament now because he's got that in the back of his head? Sure. I don't know if it was the right decision to do that and give up on your guy so quickly. Again, we'll keep ears to the ground and see if there's disciplinary action or other things going on, but that was just my initial take. All right, Greg, the rest of the show, we have decided to do more quick hitter style just because I feel like we dived into a lot of games that maybe didn't have as much meaning, or now the meaning is lost. So we're going to start with just kind of going through it. I will list off all the games. You can bring up any points you want about said games, and then I will do the same following you. Since we've already been talking for 46 minutes, this will kind of help wrap up the recap portion. On Tuesday, we had Mississippi State and Tennessee. Tennessee won 68-56 behind Chancellors's 23 points. Looks like he bounced back after that performance. We already mentioned Ohio State and Purdue, so Ohio State beats Purdue on the road. Arizona State ends up beating West Virginia. West Virginia has struggled this week. They lost to Kansas State later in the week. We have Butler and UConn, and again, UConn not at full strength, but they're able to win this one in overtime at home, 80-78. And then UCLA is able to hold off Wisconsin. They win 85-83. Wisconsin was ranked 18th last week when UCLA got this win. This is very big for their chances as they went 4-4 in Big Ten play after this win. Greg, any thoughts from the Tuesday games?
Yeah, West Virginia needs Tucker DeVries, and they need him bad. They have definitely been a surprise in general, but I feel like last week when they had a great week, they kind of stepped into that, oh, they might be something, kind of involved in this, oh, maybe the Big 12 is better than I thought it was. But they just didn't have a great week. Losing to Arizona State at home, I don't think Arizona State has some good pieces, but I don't think they're that good, even without Tucker DeVries. With the way West Virginia has been playing lately, I feel like that's a game they should win. They definitely should beat Kansas State, unless Kansas State is going to turn into something, which I don't think is going to happen. So not a great week for them. I don't know if there's any update on when Tucker DeVries might be back, but Darian DeVries is doing his darndest to make this team something. He's done, I would say, no matter what happens the rest of the way, he's done better than anyone would have thought he did or could have this year. But if they want to be something, man, they need him back as soon as possible. UCLA, Wisconsin, I still don't know what to do with either of those teams. We'll shuffle that. UConn had an interesting week, almost losing to Butler, and then they lost to Xavier, and yeah, they go to overtime with Butler at home, and they need Liam McNeely back as fast as they can get him back. It's still a little concerning with some of the results they've had even without him. You hope the team maybe develops in the absence of a guy more than anything. I was talking earlier about how maybe sometimes it takes some time to figure stuff out. So we'll see. I don't think we have anything. Oh, they do have a big game Saturday that we'll pick, so I won't get too much into that. Let's see what else from that day. Mississippi State, Tennessee just taking care of business. I still think they've been better than I would have thought they would have been this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think both you and I probably thought, hey, no Dalton Connect. That was, maybe a one-off. And yeah, they have some pieces coming back, but Chaz Lanier getting back rolling because he came off a little bit of a dud last week. So that's good for them. They're still a bit of a surprise to me. I don't know that I would have said, oh, they're not a tournament team, but you remember the narrative when they were ranked number one was, yeah, but are they really number one? And I don't think anyone's saying that they should be the number one ranked team, but I still think maybe we haven't given them enough credit up to this point. So that's all I got on Tuesday.
Yeah, Chaz Lanier stepping up was definitely at the right time for them and definitely raises their ceiling as well because they just, when they don't have his shot making ability, they become kind of what they were before Dalton Connect got there, which was kind of a bruising team who might win a lot of games and be good, but just not the same potential as they had last season. I will say, Greg, they have had discussions about medically redshirting Tucker DeVries. We'll see if that comes into fruition. Darian said that, like, hey, we're not at that point yet. So I'm kind of like, I don't know if he's coming back, and that's going to be tough for West Virginia. Either way, I don't know if, like, they're still going to make the tournament now because I do think that there's a chance they slide. But either way, he's done a really good job, as you mentioned. And yeah, Lee McNilly is just the guy they chose to go through for UConn this year, and they just don't have as much talent as they have in past years. Ceiling is definitely down from what it usually is, but a good job to get this win at least early in the week. All right, let's move on to Wednesday, Greg. Only 2 games here. We had Xavier and St. John's. Xavier had an early lead, and they blew it. There was some questionable officiating in this game that not just even Xavier fans, but Big East fans and even some St. John's fans were saying, hey, this is kind of crazy. So definitely have to watch out for that officiating as we get closer to March. St. John's comes back, wins 79-71. Kadari Richmond had 19 points. The next game we're going to talk about, Texas A&M beats Ole Miss 63-62. We already talked about that in a large fashion, so probably won't have much to say about that. But the St. John's win kind of helps establish St. John's as reestablish St. John's as maybe the team that can make the tournament out of the Big East. Another team that can make the tournament out of the Big East.
Yeah, I just wonder with Xavier if these kind of stingers from early in the year, like losing to TCU and the UC game that they had a lead in, and the Georgetown. I just wonder if that's they're only 55th in the net right now. They've got all their really big games out of the way. I would say their best remaining games are both home and away Creighton. So there's not a huge. It might just be one of those things where they got to go on a roll, and I don't know. They got like 8 games left. They probably need to win like 6 of them to be a bubble team. And it's not because they're bad. It's just because they didn't get it rolling early in the year. They dealt with some injuries, and they don't have a lot remaining. So you're going to need to win probably one of those 2 games against Creighton and all but one of the other games, because I think a loss to Butler or DePaul probably kills your chances. A loss to Seton Hall definitely kills your chances, even at Seton Hall. I mean, maybe the Nova win, if they were to win at Nova, that might be helpful, but I don't think it moves them wildly up the ladder. So I still think Sean Miller's done a great job. I mean, 2 straight, maybe 3 straight years of just roster can't stay together, injuries, this and that. Trey Green leaves the team. He's doing everything he can. So I'm happy with where this is a nice win. It's a nice feeling. It is just going to make me say, I think this year's just going to be another one of those, man, what if the ball just bounced our way in terms of injuries? Where might Xavier have ended up in a Big East that's maybe a little bit down? So I don't know. Do you have thoughts on where you think they might end up?
Yeah, I think they're near the bubble now. They're the next 4 out on Joe Nardi's bracketology right now. So I don't know if it's as extreme as you're saying, but they definitely have to pick up some wins to get themselves in a better position. And you can't take too many losses now. This is kind of the beauty and kind of the horror of things is like they had all those tough Big East games, and now they don't have that many tough Big East games down the stretch because they already went through such a tough part of their schedule. But it does limit their chances for big wins. So I'm excited to see what they do. I do think they're a better team than how they played. I think their emphasis on defense has been a lot better the last several games. All right, Greg, let's go to Thursday night. We have Maryland beating Illinois. Julian Reese had 27 points, 17 rebounds, and Derek Queen had 25 points himself to get this win. Kasparis did play for Illinois and scored 21 points himself too, but Maryland was too much for Illinois in this one.
A little worrisome to get beat that bad at home for Illinois. Maybe KJ's still a little hobbled. I don't know. We'll see. They go on this weekend. They beat Northwestern, so everybody's due for a dud. Obviously, thinks that this game happened right off of coming of losing a game late against Michigan State. But overall, their resume is still pretty good. I think this team is better than we thought they were going to be. They don't have a lot of interesting stuff coming up unless you're really interested in Ohio State at home next weekend. I would say I think they handle that game. So that's Sunday. So really their stretch of games that we have to watch coming up are Michigan State, February 15th, Wisconsin, February 18th, and they get Duke February 22nd. So that is a nice little, I like it when these non-conference things are sprinkled in there. I do always like that. They end the year with Michigan and Purdue. So they've got some opportunities. I mean, when I say they've got some opportunities, I mean, tell us if you're a 4 seed or a 6 or a 7 seed. I think this team is good enough to be a top 4 seed, as in 1, 2, 3, or 4. But they're not going to be a 1 or 2 seed. But I think they're good enough to be a 3 or 4 seed. It's just are they gonna compile the resume to do it? What are your thoughts?
I'll start overall. I think this is a game that was. I think the next Big Ten game too is going to be ones where I think it's important not to look too much into it because this is a matchup game where Julian Reese and Derek Queen dominated, and Illinois doesn't have the big guys inside I think they need. I think their talent is much more on the perimeter, and I think it's a style game. So Maryland gets the win. I think they're a good team. I'm excited to see what their guards can do in March because their guards have exceeded my expectations, a lot of people's expectations this year. So I don't know what the ceiling is for a team like that. That is so, for me, seems like even though Julian Reese has his ups and his downs, their two better players are on the interior. For Illinois, it's the loss stinks. I do think it was very much situational. I do think they can get things back on track, and I think they could work their way back up to a 3 or 4 seed and be a dangerous team again, just like they were last year as a 3 seed. So that's where I'm at with them. And to kind of I'll go right over to the next game we're going to do, Greg. Michigan-Purdue. Purdue kills them Friday night. They murder them. Not even close. And again, I think this is just about the styles for me, Greg. I'm not going to say too much after you get going. But Purdue does have guard play. Michigan doesn't have as good guard play. They tried to do the Twin Towers with Vlad Gold and Danny Wolf, and I do like them. But when you play a team with two guards who are as experienced and good as Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, this could sometimes happen. I'm still concerned about Michigan because they did way better than we maybe expected early. But to me, this was a matchup game, and that's what happened.
Not just that, but remember the context of them coming off. This is another home game, and they just lost to Ohio State, ending 20-plus game win streak. Kind of could have seen a pretty big game coming. I don't know that I would have seen this big of a deficit against another ranked in-conference opponent, but you had to know they're going to be all hands on deck for this game. So I'm kind of with you. Michigan need to kind of monitor that situation and see if they're going to fade a little bit. They're still 20th in the net, so they're still doing just fine. They are tied with Penn State in the second half right now as we speak. They do have some decent games left on the schedule between another Purdue matchup, a Michigan State. They do get Illinois later. They've got a Maryland and another Michigan State at Michigan State. So there's plenty of good games for them left. Their schedule is maybe a little backloaded in the Big Ten in terms of strength of schedule. So it'll be there. I don't know if I want to put my foot one way or the other of where they'll end up in terms of Are they going to be a single digit seed, or are they going to end up, 9-10 range or whatever? But we're definitely going to find out with what they have left on their schedule.
Oh, yeah, definitely will. All right, Greg, let's move over to Saturday. We have Minnesota upsetting Oregon. Dawson Garcia has 31 points in this one. A star who does not get the shine he deserves because he plays at a team that is not winning as many games. But they pull off that upset there. We already talked about Houston beating Kansas. We had Tennessee and Auburn, the biggest game of the week, but kind of a bruising game. Again, kind of like what you expect out of Bruce Pearl and a Tennessee game, and it was 53-51 was the final score. Janai Broome returned for this one, 16 points, 14 rebounds. So good to see him back on the floor. We had Ole Miss and Missouri playing. Missouri was able to defend their home court, winning 83-75 behind 26 points from Tamar Bates. And then we had Xavier beating UConn. They forced a last-second shot clock to get the win there, 76-72. Dalen Swain specifically was really impressive with 15 points and did a very good job on defense, drawing the attention of NBA scouts. Greg, where do you want to go first?
Tennessee took this game all the way down to the wire against Auburn, had a lead with just under 2 minutes to go, and just didn't finish it. Regardless, holding an Auburn team that's been one of the best offenses with Janai Broome back to 53 points in regulation is an accomplishment, and says what we've already been reiterating: this Tennessee team is to be taken seriously. They are good on both sides of the ball. There's nothing to shake your head at a 53-51 game when it's Auburn on one side and Tennessee on the other. Auburn plays great defense too, as we know. They just, in the past, it's always been that Auburn defense, but now it's their offense is just on fire. So not much else to add there. Let's see what else. We already talked about Houston, Kansas. The Oregon Minnesota thing. It's like, does it make you want to? I know we've already expressed some concerns, some doubts about Oregon, but this loss, yeah, it's at Minnesota. I don't know. This one feels a little bit more, I don't know, worrisome. They still have plenty of quad one wins. Don't forget that they beat Bama way back in November. Texas A&M. They've beaten Maryland. They have plenty of good wins. They don't really have any bad losses besides this one and UCLA. We were already kind of on the fence about them. What can they be? What can they do? Nate Biddle is a great player. Jackson Shelstad is a great player. But part of me feels like this is destined to be like a 6 or a 7 seed that loses their first game in the tournament.
I don't know where I am with. We mentioned it last week that they're one of the teams I don't know, and we're gonna probably have a list at the end of the season: teams we like, teams we don't know about, teams we don't want to pick, and they will probably be in the don't know pick even at that point. But it is fair to note, Greg, that Minnesota 3-game winning streak beat Michigan as well, so you have to kind of figure to question, Oregon's ceiling. You have to also question Michigan, and they won at Iowa, which Iowa's not the greatest this year, but winning at Iowa is tough. So. Maybe they're just getting hot. Maybe that's it. Dawson Garcia is a very good player as well. So I don't know how I feel about that. I will say, we're doing this new system where we're doing top stories. Any other week, like Tennessee Auburn is going to be in that top stories, but with how much other stuff happened, that's not always going to be there. And honestly, I think it kind of points to that Tennessee played better than we thought, but we expected Auburn to win with or without Janai Broome. And they're like them and Duke, it just doesn't matter. So I'm sure we'll have games like that back in the top stories at some point, but for a week that had so much going on, maybe not. And I'm excited. Janai Broome's back. He's going to maybe win National Player of the Year. We'll see if he does what he does against Cooper Flagg when that all comes down to the voting. But man, is Auburn fun to watch, even in games where they only score 53 points. All right, Greg, let's go to our picks from the week. We are going to start it with a Iowa State-Arizona game on Monday night. Arizona, we talked about how hot they have been since Big 12 play started. Where are you going, Greg?
I'm going to pick Iowa State. I see that Arizona is favored in this game. That's one of the reasons that was the reason I put it on here. I thought we were going to both pick Iowa State, but Joe, I'll let you speak to the people.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona's favored. I think Iowa State is not of the level of Auburn and Duke, where right now it feels like those two teams are untouchable, to be honest. They have some injury issues, and they're having guys fill in. I'm impressed with what they have done. But when you have different games where you're going on the road in conference play, and a team like Arizona, who has seemingly found their footing at least a little bit, I'm going Arizona to protect their home court. I doesn't say anything bad about Iowa State. Just this is a tough, grueling schedule, and they just aren't as good as Duke and Auburn. All right, let's go to the next one, Greg. We have Kentucky and Tennessee. This one is on Tuesday, a game that I think a lot of Kentucky fans would like to have because of what happened against Vanderbilt this past week.
I am just getting to picks because it's been a crazy day. So I'm doing normally I have to check and see what did I do, what did I pick. We're going gut this time. Great. I will pick Tennessee at home.
Okay.
Defense, I think will do a lot to smother that Kentucky offense, and we already know Kentucky's defense hasn't been great. So after a 50-point outing against Auburn, they get to play a little bit of a softer defense. I like Tennessee to win the game.
Yep. Tennessee for me too. Physical defense. Kentucky has not been the greatest against tough teams. They did beat Texas A&M, so maybe not. But on the road, they haven't been that great. And Lamont Butler still looks like he's bothered by a shoulder injury. And without Kirk Kriisa either, like that really puts a lot of emphasis on your backups being freshmen. And hopefully Lamont Butler's feeling better, but I haven't seen it yet. So in a big game on the road where they've struggled, I think Tennessee is the logical pick. Wednesday, we have Wisconsin and Maryland. Greg, we talked about how Wisconsin lost to UCLA last week. We talked about Maryland's win over Illinois. Wisconsin is still ranked. They are ranked 17 in this one, but on the road at Maryland.
I will take Maryland to win this game and for Derek Queen and Julian Reese to have another nice day inside. I know that Wisconsin in the past has been a team that might play along with that kind of style, but I just don't know that I like them in this particular game against Maryland.
Yeah, Wisconsin 2 road wins all year, and it was to USC and Rutgers. And I think this is just a little bit better of a team than those teams, obviously, the way things have gone. They're another team that, if we're trying to figure out, we'll probably still be figuring out Wisconsin. A lot of these Big Ten teams by the end of the year, but we'll probably trying to figure them out. We know they have John Tonji, but I like the interior play of Maryland as well, so I'm going Maryland. Next one up, Greg, we have the Alabama-Mississippi State game, one of the better games of the week, number 4 at number 14. We have some issues with Alabama, possibly the chemistry, possibly the leadership, whatever it might be. Mark Sears, I guess we expect him to play this one, the whole game, but we'll see what happens.
I will put my money on Mark Sears to just be on fire. Despite the Mississippi State defense, that will be tenacious. Which feels like we could say that about 10 teams in the SEC. Goodness gracious. I know there's a lot going on, but sometimes that kind of stuff pushes these guys to the next level. Hopefully that's what Nate Oates was trying to do, and he's just on fire, and they win on the road.
Go on Mississippi State, like the defense. Like Hubbard, I think he can probably put up a decent amount of points in this game against Alabama, who has not played the best defense. And I do think there's going to be some chemistry issues and some issues mentally for some of the players when their coach pulls them like that. So I'm going Mississippi State. I think if all things are being equal and that didn't happen this weekend or Mark Sears got benched, I'd probably pick Alabama. The last game from Wednesday, Greg, we have Texas at Ole Miss. This might be notable for a couple of reasons, but mostly Chris Beard, coach of Ole Miss, formerly coached Texas.
Yeah, that should be interesting. It is at Ole Miss, not at Texas, so won't be hearing any rowdy cheers or anything like that. I'll take Ole Miss. Lost 2 games last week, stunning fashion to Texas A&M, and then they just lost to Mizzou at Mizzou. Mizzou's looking pretty good this year, so I like that defense to get things back on track. But, of course, if we were to come back next week and talk about this game, it would be Trey Johnson went off. Ole Miss defense couldn't contain him. But I don't want to pick that defense to have a third straight game that they lose. I still think that like I said last week, that defense is so good, it's just going to keep them in games. And they've been in a couple of close games over the last couple of weeks. I'll pick them to win this one.
On the flip side, I don't know if I can trust Texas to win 3 straight games against ranked teams. Like, haven't really been that good this year. Trey Johnson, you're asking a lot of a freshman to keep on doing what he has been doing. So, I mean, for that reason, I'm going Ole Miss, and I think the tough defense is maybe going to bother Trey Johnson a little bit, and they can get the win. I think they're a good team that is well coached, and Chris Beard will want to win this one for sure. We'll move all the way over to Saturday, Greg, for some of the games that are going to be on the weekend. We have the Florida-Tennessee game. So here's the thing, Greg. There are some big games this weekend that might have other storylines, might be rivalries, but this is probably the biggest game of the week. We have number 5 versus number 6, Tennessee, Florida, and it is going to be in Tennessee. All the cloud is lifted from Todd Golden. Tennessee has Chaz Lanier back playing decently. Who are you going with?
Pass.
Okay.
I'll take Tennessee because they're at home. But I think you're right. It's the game to be probably most excited about this week. There's a lot of good basketball. I have a whole section of just games that we're not picking that are going to be watchable for one reason or another, because one team is good, because another team, whatever. But this game is probably the marquee game of the week, which means it will be a 30-point blowout one way or the other. And we shouldn't be surprised because that's just how these things work. But I can't wait. Do you know what time this game is? This a noon game? I usually try to go through and pick these and list these in terms of time.
It's noon.
If it's an early game, that makes me so happy, because you can basically just wake up and make yourself a nice brunch and get to watch Florida Tennessee. So
this is a very good Saturday. Again, maybe not all of like the ranked matchups, but in terms of viewership, this might be the best Saturday of college basketball until we get to March. Like, it's incredible. So I'm going Florida. Like I mentioned all the time, I'm pretty high on them from the start. Their guard play is great. I don't know if I trust Chaz Lanier to continue to play as well as he has been. Obviously, with that funk he was in a couple weeks ago. I think Florida will come out firing, and this one will get the win on the road. The next game will go over, Greg. Auburn and Ole Miss. This will be a fun battling of styles. Ole Miss has a couple big games this week, so who are you going with?
I will take Auburn. That did factor a little bit into another reason that I picked Ole Miss to beat Texas. I didn't like the idea of picking Ole Miss to be on a 4-game losing streak, and I just can't pick against Auburn right now. Although, if they were going to get picked off by a team, it would probably be a Tennessee, who darn near beat them, or an Ole Miss, when we're talking about the elite of the elite defenses, because that's the only way you're going to stop them. I don't think Ole Miss's offense is as good as Tennessee's. I don't know what the numbers say about that, but I know it's on the road. With all that said, I'll pick Auburn.
Yeah, they have a brutal schedule coming up for Auburn that, like, you don't know when they might lose next, but there's a couple opportunities. But it might be a team like this that could do it. I'm going Auburn as well. Janai Broome looks a lot better than I thought he would coming back from that injury, so I'm going to take them as well. They look like they're firing on all cylinders. And again, even if they take a loss or two, it is still very much Auburn and Duke and then everyone else in my book. All right, the next game we'll go over, Greg. We have Houston and Texas Tech, a game where Houston got a quad win, and also, obviously, as you mentioned, Greg got another one because of results of other games. But Texas Tech is a team that very high in the net, playing pretty well, and just got ranked for the first time. They're 22nd, so 22nd at number 6 Houston.
Yeah, but give Joe credit, because Joe's been saying that he thought that was a better team than maybe people had them. I want to say for a couple weeks now, that you thought that was a better game on certain team schedules. I know we brought it up in some sort of context. I can't remember exactly what, but let's make sure we give you the credit because you were the one that brought it up first. In terms of this game, I am going to keep riding the Houston train. They are at home for this game, but this is another one of those that, like, I don't necessarily think I'm leaning, even though I think Houston is really good and better than, maybe what their resume overall says. I think their Texas Tech they're going to cause them issues even at home.
I think it might be a low-scoring, close game, but Houston just has a tendency to win those things. Mentioned how their defense really operates and really confuses teams with kind of the doubling of the ball screen. That's going to be huge in this game, and like Texas Tech, but going on the road and beating the number 6 team in the country is a little bit harder than maybe I think they can harder of a test than maybe they can do. So let's go to the last game we're going to pick, Greg. We have UConn at Marquette. Marquette is 8-1 in the Big East. UConn is 6-3. If they want any chance of a Big East title, regular season wise, they probably need to win this one.
I have no reason to pick UConn in this game, which means we're going to find out on Wednesday night that Liam McNeely is playing in this game, and UConn is going to destroy Marquette. But I'll pick Marquette for now.
All we can do is operate on the information we have, and I am with you. Marquette has some ups and downs that concern me in terms of tournament play, but I like Cam Jones too much, and I don't think UConn has a player who's close to as good as him. So I'm going to go with Marquette. All right, Greg, we have a list of games to watch here. We're not going to pick them because there's too many games this week, but do you want me to quickly read them off, and then we can go over any thoughts you might have on any of them?
Yeah, just take them one by one. I'll give you like my gut reaction or tell you why, what made me put that on there or whatever.
Oh, lightning round. Here we go. All right.
Yes, that's the idea.
Xavier Creighton on Wednesday.
Two teams trying to stamp their tournament resume. They both need this game. Only one of them's going to win it. Hopefully for us, that's Xavier.
Hopefully for us, it is Xavier. We have St. Mary's and Santa Clara on Wednesday as well.
We got a big week for St. Mary's. They are going to have another game that we're going to talk about in lightning round in just a second. They got to go to Santa Clara, who we know is probably better than what their record says. I'd advise them to win this game.
Yeah, Santa Clara ranked 60th in the net, so this would be very big for them. Next one up, Missouri, Mississippi State. This one is on Saturday.
Yeah, I must have had my wires crossed because when I filled this out, I don't know if you saw, Joe, I had Ole Miss, Missouri, and that's not the game. It's Missouri, Mississippi State.
Yep.
Just another ranked on ranked matchup that I don't think rises to the level of some of these other games that we picked. But we could very much end up talking about this game next week.
All right. I don't know if you have to add anything about Duke, North Carolina, because Duke's going to win. That's why we're not picking it. We both have Duke to win, but.
And that's the thing is I saw some lists. I think it's Andy Katz that puts out the list that, his top 10 games of the week. And this was his number 1. And I just said, I get it because it's the rivalry, but unless you're saying, hey, it's just a rivalry game, anything can happen. Like, there is nothing in my brain that makes me think I'm going to pick North Carolina. Even at Carolina, there's just nothing there. Which means they're going to win by 30, and we're going to come back talking next week about how it's time. The Carolina track it's back on. They're going to make the tournament. They're going to make the national title. Just wait, and that's why it's on there, because it's a rivalry game, and you have no idea what's going to happen.
Greg,
Duke's going to win.
We're 2 weeks removed from you calling North Carolina a top 15 team. Do you want to rescind that?
I said I feel like they have a top 15 roster.
Mm-hmm. All right, if you're going to rescind that, you can rescind it. But all right, next one up, Arkansas, Kentucky. Can I take this one?
Yeah, go ahead. You don't have any connection to this game.
No. Okay. So people, this should be the most watched game this weekend. I know it's hard to say. Like the best games could be Tennessee, Florida. But if you want to see a crazy environment, there's some fans who are going to cheer him. There's some fans who are going to boo him. There is obviously Kentucky is struggling. They just lost to Vanderbilt, and they have some injuries that maybe you think that maybe the game's close. Arkansas desperately needs a win. So John Calipari going back to Kentucky. I would say this should be the most watched game of the weekend because it is going to have all the storylines, even outside of the rivalry. College Game Day is going to Duke, North Carolina. I think they missed a huge opportunity here because they go to Duke, North Carolina all the time. This is a for the Kentucky at least, once every 15 years, once every 20 years type of game where a coach leaves and goes to a school that has to come back and play Kentucky. So, going to be a fun one to watch. Kentucky does not want to lose. They might lose to Tennessee, but Mark Pope does not want to lose this game because the wrath of Kentucky fans will get on him, and rightfully or wrongfully in that case. All right, Gonzaga St. Mary's, Greg, Saturday.
a game that would, I feel like in most years, be appointment television. I still think it's going to be a good game to watch. I don't know what's. I'm assuming it's. I think it's an ESPN game. I believe when they play, it's usually on ESPN. Important game for both teams. Just with St. Mary's trying to crawl their way into. I don't know where they're at in the net right now, but I don't think they're in the tournament right now under any. But they're good enough that they could get there. Gonzaga maybe reeling a little bit. I still think just looking at that team, they've got to be good. I just can't quit them. I would like to see them win this game and maybe give me a semblance of an idea of what they're going to be.
Yeah, Gonzaga not ranked this week in the AP Top 25. And really not even one of the teams that are really close to getting ranked. They're in the votes, but not really close. So definitely need to get some wins here. And the WCC has a lot of good teams, but maybe not a great team this year. Ohio State at Illinois. This one's on Sunday, Greg.
I already mentioned it. Just something to watch. I mean, like, I think Illinois is going to take this game pretty handily, but with the way this Ohio State team has been up and down, maybe they figure something out, and all of a sudden they put themselves in a position where it's like, all right, time to start thinking about if they're going to make the tournament or not. They're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination, but they string a couple of wins together, they get a game like this, maybe we'll have to start talking about them.
Definitely. All right, so that wraps up our show. Greg, any final thoughts for the week?
Oh boy, there's a lot of basketball to watch. I can't wait.
Yeah, this is my final thought as well. So Saturday is, like I said, the week of the season to watch college basketball. The weekend of the season to watch college basketball is this one before March. All those good games, all those good storylines, some bubble action thrown in there as well. It's going to be fun to see that. Also, my turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts out, whether that's on Apple or Spotify or wherever you might get them. And also to like and subscribe to the TGH YouTube channel, the Gamehouse YouTube channel. That is where all our podcasts will be uploaded as well if you want to see us in video form. A lot of fun basketball games to come up. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.